We're live in the Trustmark studio and in the house. It's Grant Callen, president of Empower Mississippi. I got one from both of you guys, specifically Will and Grant. I have to be left out of this. You ready? It is No Shave November.
I've never participated.
When men throw out the razor, let their beards and mustaches grow. But is that new scruffy look affecting the man's dating life or his amorous status in life? New poll out there. You ready for this, guys? Both of you kind of quiet. Both of you.
With bated breath.
I've been ambushed on this show before, so.
No.
I'm ready.
New survey of dating.com shows 68% of users like facial hair on men. Said it makes them look more masculine and mature. 68%. That's almost 70%.
I believe it.
So you guys okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to online dating, men with facial hair in one or more of their profile pictures receives 3 times more matches than those without. Now, am I making you guys happy?
You are.
65% of those polled find a little scruff or a 5 o'clock shadow to be the most attractive type of facial hair. 65%. It's important to men to take care of their beards. 77% saying it's a turn off if it's not properly groomed. And if you're going to grow it, the facial hair, go all the way with 45% of those who like facial hair saying that they don't like a man with a mustache only. So both of you guys qualify. You have the beards and everything else. On the positive note, less than 5% of people said they would never date somebody with facial hair. That's less than 5%. So 95% of the people would. So now did I redeem myself as far as...
You did well. You did well.
Thank you.
I can't speak to the mind of a woman, but I will say my wife will not let me shave it. She's a big fan of the beard and won't let me shave it.
Really?
Yep.
Have you wanted to shave it for her?
Oh, I get antsy and like to change things up every once in a while, but she likes the beard. So
that's a good thing about it.
I'm gonna keep it.
You can always send her off for a couple of weeks and come back, and you're
it's back.
Yeah, it's back. So.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be in.
Good to talk to you, sir. We got 2021 here before you know. You realize this is November the 18th.
I know.
A month and a half, and we'll be back in session.
And it feels like the legislature just left because they did.
Because they did. I did ask the lieutenant governor yesterday, I said, do you guys want another staggered session? To which he exclaimed, no, not. I think he would like to have said some profanities in there, but he didn't.
Yeah.
But nobody wants another staggered session, but who knows what's going to happen?
Well, there's no doubt this year created all kinds of disruption, not just for the legislature, but I think for a lot of public policy. And, as an organization who focuses on education and work and justice, we have just noticed that particularly in all 3 of those, education, work, and justice, there have been tremendous disruptions. And a lot of it has been really hard on people. Yeah. But we believe it's really created some big opportunities to rethink the way we do things. And I think in the long run, education and work and justice are all going to be in a better place at the end of this.
Tell me a little bit about how Empower Mississippi, because, the audience is vast and we always have new people coming in. How did Empower Mississippi come about being?
Yeah, so we've been around. In January will be 7 years. We have always been focused on how do we help all Mississippians have the opportunity to rise. I grew up in Mississippi. I'm from Laurel. This was the best state, the best place in the world for me to grow up. I've got 5 kids. This is where I want to raise my kids. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Ditto.
But when I look around our state and I have conversations with people in every corner of this state, I talk to people who haven't had the same experience, who are struggling, whether it's they're struggling to find a good education system, struggling to find a good school, struggling to find a job. They've had interactions with our criminal justice system that have devastated their family. So our approach at Empower is about how do we make sure every Mississippian has the chance to achieve the American dream, and if there are barriers that stand in the way of that, we want to work on removing those barriers. And so that's what we do. Those are our 3 areas of focus, education, work, and justice. And
so you go back in these 7 years, and do you look, Grant, at some of the successes that you've had in 7 years?
We do. And, I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And, we don't do anything alone. We do it with people across the state who partner with us, and policymakers. Ultimately, we can only advocate for change. They have to take the action and push the button. But I'm really proud that 7 years ago we were just starting out on this charter school path. There were no charter schools in the state of Mississippi, and we were looking to create options, particularly in the most at-risk communities in Mississippi. And today we have 7 charter schools. 5 of those are in Jackson. Virtually all of them have a waiting list. Parents are beating the door down to get in because they know it's providing hope and opportunity for their kids to get a great education.
That's been a political football, and even more so in the last, during the campaign season, because, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have basically said that no money's going to go to any private schools, and if private schools are getting federal dollars, they're going to cut it out. How does that affect us here?
Well, and I'm concerned about his approach on charters as well.
You talking about public?
Biden has been very critical.
Has he delineated? Has he decided? Has he said? What's the word I'm looking for? Delineated. There we go. Between those two, the private and public, that you know of?
I haven't seen him delineate, and this is not a political issue. This has never been a political issue. President Obama was a big supporter of charter schools.
Well, wait a minute. He wasn't when he got in. He was before his kids were there. But
he talked. Well, he shut down the DC, or he tried to shut down the scholarship program, which was a private choice program, but they saved it. But he has been an advocate for charters. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Trump has been a big supporter of school choice. So I think it's a bad thing that this has taken on a partisan kind of twinge to it. This is not about left or right or red or blue. This is about helping kids in every community have access to a great school. That shouldn't be a partisan issue.
No, it shouldn't. I think when we look back on this opportunities missed, one of the saddest is going to be, because I really believed in the 4 years, if Trump had 4 more years, we would finally get some modicum of school choice. Because it was one of the things that he and, of course, Ivanka and some other people wanted it. And I don't think that's a possibility now.
Well, he has certainly pounded the bully pulpit on this issue, and I'm grateful for that. But education is ultimately a state issue, and that's a good thing. We don't want, at the end of the day, Congress taking on education more than they already have. We believe these decisions need to be made as close to parents and the local community as possible. And, Mississippi, to their credit, has taken some big steps to bring school choice. There's so much more to be done. We haven't gone nearly far enough because there's still 100,000 kids in Mississippi that get up every day and go to a failing school district.
But in reality, too, your opposition is well-funded.
It is. It is. But you know what? We've got parents on our side. And when you poll this thing and you talk to parents across the state, it's not even close. Parents believe they have the right to choose where their kids go to school. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing them step up and, go arm in arm with other parents and say to their leadership, look, we ought to have the freedom to choose where we go to school. And whether that looks like a ESA, which we've talked a lot about in the past, or charter school. 2 things that we think are really going to be a more politically possible in the near term is we want to see an expansion of Mississippi's virtual program, and we want to see more public-to-public choice.
Expansion to where?
Well, so long before the pandemic, Florida created a full-time public virtual option that's run by their Department of Education, and it simply gives parents across the state in any district the freedom to opt into a virtual platform if their neighborhood public school isn't a good fit. So let's say you're halfway through the semester and your child is getting bullied and you can't get him out fast enough or her out fast enough. Or let's say your child has special needs and their district is not the right fit.
I got you.
This full-time virtual platform would give parents either a temporary option or a full-time option so that they can access classes that they wouldn't be able to get in their neighborhood district school.
We wouldn't have any school district lines where across the street you got to go one school. When it came to virtual, you could cross those lines.
Well, with virtual, correct.
Yeah, and so you could actually go just about anywhere if it's virtual, couldn't you?
And what that's right. And what we see in the response to the pandemic is sort of this patchwork approach in Mississippi, where districts, to their credit, are doing their best, but we really think what you ought to have is a statewide full-time option that parents could opt into if they needed a better setting.
Are you going to push legislation on that through Empower coming up?
Well, we're going to certainly be advocating for it and working with lawmakers to see where the appetite is.
Some of the other advocacies for the 2021 session when we come back with Grant Callen, and John McKay joins us. John is President and CEO, Mississippi Manufacturers Association. What must we do to make it even more attractive for businesses to expand that we already have and for others? All right, Leonard Skinner, speaking of rock bands and bands, the rock band famous for Sweet Home Alabama and Freebird, they now officially have a highway sign pointing to the site where the plane went down. Why is it taking so long? Anybody? Why is it taking so long? Fans gathered last Sunday as MDOT unveiled exit signs from Interstate 55 near the great city of Macomb and State Highway 568 near Gillsburg. The signs provide directions toward a monument commemorating the October 20th, 1977 plane crash that killed some of the members of the band. 3 large granite markers were put out at Gillsburg in 2019, but until they had the exit signs, people were just driving around. There was no GPS. People were always asking, where's the crash site? It's very difficult to get to, and there's no markings, said Bobby McDaniel, president of the Leonard Skinner Monument Project. The monument has become one of the biggest tourist attractions in southwest Mississippi. Since drawing 4,500 people from 13 counties, 39 states, and 5 Canadian provinces. And that was without the directions where they had to go find it. At a remote site which is 8 miles west of Interstate 55 in a place with no cell phone service for navigation. Why wouldn't you put a little store or something out there now? Looks like you should be. Listen, of the 26 people on the plane, 20 survived. Those killed were the singer Ronnie Van Zant, the guitarist Steve Gaines, his sister, backing vocalist Cassie Gaines, and the assistant road manager, Mr. Kilpatrick, the pilot Walter McCreary, and the co-pilot William Gray. Our state legislatures passed it. Among those pushing for was Representative Republican Becky Curry of Brookhaven. She was a student nurse at the time of the crash. She said local hospital employees worked through the night to help the crash victims without even knowing who they were. Curry said she always has been a fan of the band's music. And she said, and I quote, I spent a lot of time in the summer listening to Leonard Skinner and having way too much fun. So the next time she's on, I was going to just counsel her and suggest the next time one way would have been enough.
Sounds like she had a good time.
It does sound like she had a good time. But they had 4,500 people from 13 counties, 39 states, and 5 Canadian provinces who actually went out in the middle of nowhere just to see that. Now with the sign up there, come on. Take advantage of this.
Some good music.
Let's get back to what we were talking about, and what's the agenda for 2021? What's some of the things that you want to work on?
Well, we've got a number of things in each of those areas: education, work, and justice. But we haven't really touched on justice, and there is there's been a lot of misinformation this past year about criminal justice reform, what it is, what it isn't. Our goal is to make sure Mississippi is safe as it can possibly be. And we don't. We have sort of right size our prison system. And when you look at the data from the last year, we're still in the middle of a prison crisis. We went from the 3rd highest incarceration rate to the 2nd highest, which just means Mississippi locks up more people than almost anywhere on the planet. There's some really important things that need to happen to make sure we make prison safe. We've had almost 90. Inmates die in our prison system since Christmas of last year, and to their credit, legislature has worked on this issue. I think we'll see some more legislation coming out in January.
So other than putting more money in there, what's the solution?
Well, so our belief is that we ought to use incarceration as a last resort and not a first resort, and so.
Wait a minute. Why is that not being? How do you know? Are there examples now that somebody is being put in prison and doesn't need to be there? I mean, to a point where it's statistically a problem.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at states like Texas, a far-right Republican state, well, it's maybe less right than we thought it was after the election, but Texas has really led the way on this, where they have said, we've got to make sure we don't have overly harsh, overly long sentences for people who commit nonviolent offenses. So we've got to let somebody serve their time, but not put them away forever, because that's incredibly costly on the state. And so the goal is to make sure we keep people safe and we keep our community safe, and we have a prison system.
I'm trying to get to the end of to the bottom of this, though, because we did away with the 85% rule for the most part. So what would you change as far as the ruling? Would you just change the ruling as far as the guidelines for the judges and sentencing? How would you do that?
Well, part of it is on the front end. It's making sure that if somebody has an addiction issue and they're not a threat to society, one, drug courts is a great alternative to make sure people don't end up behind bars when they really just need addiction and treatment. And then on the back end, we've got to make sure we allow our parole board to do the work they were intended to do. And so, there was a bill last year that was ultimately vetoed that would have given our parole board the ability to review people who have served time, who have had good behavior. It's an incentive for them to make sure we encourage people to have good behavior when you're in prison. So we want to make sure that parole board has the opportunity to review cases so that we have a path to restoration and a path to rehabilitation for those who are nonviolent and who are no longer a threat to society.
Rand Callen's my guest. You seem to be mirroring a lot of the things that Burl Cain has said when he's here. He's been on the program several times, and bringing those fresh ideas and a lot of experience too to our prison system here. Have you met with him? Have you talked to him?
We've had people on our team that have. I hadn't personally had a chance to visit with him yet. But I'll tell you what, Louisiana has been a leader on this. Yeah. And they've got challenges like we do. They have a high incarceration rate. And what he was able to do at Angola is commendable. And I'm excited. I think he's got some great ideas, and looking forward to seeing what he does here.
Is there a success rate of the drug courts?
I don't have the data in front of me, but it's been very successful in keeping people out of prison that don't need to be there, that need to get help.
It's been one of the things that Chief Justice Randolph, when he's been on the air numerous times, talked about, and they didn't have the successes they wanted in the last session, but hopefully they'll try again.
Well, it's a broader conversation about the way we think about public safety and criminal justice, and too many people have addiction issues and end up with long, harsh sentences that ends up destroying their family. It's incredibly costly to the state. And if there's a way to keep people out on the front end and on the back end, make sure they don't come back in, it's going to save taxpayer dollars and help our citizens.
I don't think anybody disagrees with that, because if you take somebody in and they just made a bad mistake and they come in, the longer they stay there, the more they are going to be tainted by just what goes on in prison, number one.
Right. There's sort of this notion that we think, well, if somebody's got an addiction issue, at least they'll go to prison and they'll dry out and they'll come out a better citizen.
Never happens.
And it just doesn't. And what ends up happening is you end up becoming a more hardened criminal.
Let's look at it this way. Networking is good or bad. If you're networking with business executives at the Marriott, it ain't the same as you're networking for 5 to 10 in Parchman. It's a little bit different.
That's right. And 95% of the people currently in prison will one day get out.
Yeah.
And it's in all of our interests to make sure that they're ready and they don't come out in worse standing than they were when they went in. You get your funding through mostly corporate folks? Or? We have individuals and foundations and companies, but really most of it is individuals across the state and across the nation who are excited about what's going on in Mississippi and support.
I do know there are other, and I have some information on my desk where to schedule that interview, but there are other nonprofit organizations out there working, and things like the Certificate of Need. Speaking about growing Mississippi, and I know that I got that from, I believe this one was from Mississippi Public Policy, the need for the state legislators to look at that as far as a Certificate of Need. Is that something you guys are working on too?
Certificate of Need specifically is not. But I'll tell you what we do believe. We do believe there's a lot of barriers to work. And even in the healthcare space.
Certification is another.
There's licensure issues that really create a barrier to people being able to offer the services they're trained to do. So whether that's scope of practice,
I didn't realize that scope of practice is that big of a deal. And then it's almost like the sex trade. We learned about and we understood how many people in this country were involved in that one way or the other. But this permeates just about everything. The last we heard is if you're a highway patrolman in Virginia and you'd love to move to Mississippi, you got to go through the whole thing again, which is crazy.
It is a huge barrier.
Nurses, everything.
And we ought to be, work provides great value to people, and we ought to be removing every barrier so that people can get it plugged into a great
2021, around the corner. Go stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Grant Callen, John McKay. We'll talk about businesses.